Ooh, that new Star Wars movie, huh? That sure did suck. And I could talk about why it sucked, and I will, but I want to talk about more. That is why I have entitled this video, The Bastardization of Star Wars, because the Disney company has utterly abused and disrespected this property. The sequel trilogy is a god-awful mess with no passion, no direction, vision, or cohesion. But despite how bad it is, everyone involved has this unbelievable arrogance, like this is the new and improved Star Wars. But the truth is, nobody made the sequels because they had an idea. They exist solely as a product and nothing else. Now, I'm going to tell you everything that went wrong here, but in the words of Pitbull, to understand the future, we have to go back in time. So, how did we get to where we are? In the 1970s, the name Star Wars referred to a single movie, a space-themed fairy tale about a lonely farm boy and his quest to rescue a princess. Star Wars was a movie nobody believed in. Studio after studio turned down the idea, worrying that science fiction was no longer a popular genre and that Lucas's ideas just weren't accessible to the public. Studios wanted him to do something more like his previous film, a down-to-earth coming-of-age movie called American Graffiti. Even 20th Century Fox, who eventually agreed to produce, had no faith in the idea itself, only that Lucas had another hit movie in him after his previous success. Star Wars was released in only 32 theaters across the country and was widely considered a joke and box office poison. But as we all know, Star Wars was a surprise hit and went on to become, when adjusted for inflation, the second highest grossing film in North America and the fourth highest grossing film in the world. Prior to 1977, 20th Century Fox's highest annual profits were $37 million, but that year it skyrocketed to $79 million. Star Wars swept the 1978 Oscars, winning Academy Awards for Best Costume Design, Best Film Editing, Best Original Score, Best Sound, Best Visual Effects, a Special Achievement for Sound Effects Editing, and a Scientific and Engineering Award. The original Star Wars was a worldwide phenomenon that changed the landscape of filmmaking forever. Its effects and approach to characters and world building were unlike anything that had come before it. Even though Star Wars took inspiration from science fiction films, westerns, fairy tales, and countless other sources, the end result was entirely unique. Filmmaking wasn't the only thing the 1977 little movie that could change. It also changed movie marketing, more than any other piece of media in history. Kenner were the lucky ones who got the toy contract for Star Wars as, once again, the big companies dismissed the property. The toys weren't ready in time for the holiday season, so Kenner sold gift certificates good for 4 figures, which became the hottest selling gifts of the Christmas season. The toys only got bigger and bigger. Nothing could stop the iron grip Star Wars had on the imaginations of children. So Star Wars being a product is nothing new. It's been a merchandising juggernaut since the beginning. So what's the difference now? Well, in the early days of Star Wars, it captivated the minds of the public. People wanted more, and the companies were willing to give it to them. Star Wars sold out almost immediately with the infamous holiday special and the numerous guest spots on variety programs.
Seems we've landed on some sort of comedy variety show planet.
But that stuff never really damaged the brand because it was campy and fun and was also very easy to separate from the films. The problem comes in when you start thinking of Star Wars as a product first and a film series second. Executives had thought that way for a long time, but it wasn't until George Lucas sold the property that the mentality seeped into the very product. I know some people really hate the prequels, but you can't deny that there is passion for those stories in those movies. The Star Wars sequels don't feel like movies with a brand tie-in, they feel like a brand with movie tie-ins. Characters are introduced for no other reason than to just sell toys of them. The movies don't even fit together. They don't tell a story anyone wanted to tell. The story is an afterthought to the knowledge that a new Star Wars trilogy would bring in a ton of money. Sometimes a director can take a money-grubbing assignment like that and put their all into it and make something that defies expectations. But these movies just didn't happen that way. Who would have ever thought we'd have a Star Wars movie with so many dull characters? Any characters who had any potential had it entirely destroyed by the time the trilogy ended. And these movies weren't just content in ruining their own characters, but they decided that they had to ruin the original trilogy's characters too. And with the name Star Wars being crammed down our throats so much in recent years, it can be hard to remember just how brilliant those original characters really were.
I want so much more than they've got planned.
Luke is a young farm boy living with his aunt and uncle who yearns for something more. While going about his business, he discovers a distress call from a princess and answers the call to adventure. It sounds about as basic as you can get on the surface, but looking just a little closer, we'll find why this seemingly simple character, directly inspired by Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces, made such a massive impact on the public zeitgeist for more than 4 decades now. Despite the familiar framework, Luke Skywalker was very different than the typical fantasy and adventure film heroes of his day. He is not a traditionally masculine character. He's stoic or unflinchingly aggressive or even very physically strong. He isn't brooding or mysterious. He's mentally strong, kind-hearted, idealistic, emotional. He only fights when he's threatened, winning through planning, quick thinking, or sheer determination. Han Solo is the more familiar cowboy-like hero, feigning relaxed body language before shooting the bounty hunter Greedo under the table. Compare that to Luke entering Cloud City. He draws his blaster against Boba Fett and a horde of stormtroopers, but doesn't fire even once. During the rescue at Jabba's palace, he gives Jabba every opportunity right to the very end to resolve the situation peacefully. Luke's motivations are entirely selfless. He has a very strong sense of morality and is consistently willing to put his life on the line to save others. In A New Hope, he insists on saving Leia despite having no skills or experience, simply because he knows if he doesn't, nobody else will. He's a rare hero, or even protagonist, who does not have a love interest. His caring nature nearly gets him killed multiple times. He is outwardly affectionate. He saves the galaxy not by killing someone, but by refusing to. His love and compassion are what allow him to resist the temptations of the dark side and redeem Darth Vader against the advice of his Jedi Masters. This is the character who touched the lives of multiple generations in a massively significant way. People talk a lot these days about kids needing good role models in the media. Well, I don't think you could get a better role model than Luke Skywalker. At the time, this compassionate, excitable, plucky hero was who every kid wanted to be. This character had an organic connection with people.
They feel like, well, I could do that. I mean, he's not spectacularly talented, and that's the cleverness. He's so naive, and he's so kind of, well, golly, you know,
I see what you mean.
You know, that he's not like, well, do this and do that, and that's how we'll win. It's just that he's driven by his own sincerity.
Luke Skywalker has been used by child psychologists by invoking the character. Certain concepts like how to get in touch with and manage one's emotions were compared to Luke's use of the Force and his actions in the film, making them easier for kids to grasp. When I took my queer film class, my professor, who was a guy in his 60s, told us about how Luke Skywalker was actually a big icon in the gay community back in the 70s and early 80s. Young gay men related to Luke's struggle in the backwater traditional planet where he didn't fit in. His struggle against his father, trying to change the foundation of who he is, and Luke's resistance to what was expected of him. They appreciated his empathy and unquestioning acceptance of those different than him. In one queer reading of the original trilogy, filmmaker Curtis Matsky interprets the Force as a metaphor for sexuality, something Luke has inside himself he must learn to navigate. But Luke spoke to anyone who was an outcast for any reason at all. His struggle was relatable and his triumph was inspiring, but not because he was a blank slot you could insert yourself into. He was full of personality. This was a character who has every dearly held principle he had questioned and used against him. He is mercilessly punished for it until finally his faith in humanity is ultimately proven right. So of course with a character this beloved, endearing, and influential, somebody just had to come along and ruin him. It's already a pretty well-known fact at this point that Luke Skywalker's character was completely misrepresented and outright ruined in The Last Jedi, the worst Star Wars movie of all time until The Rise of Skywalker came along. People hated it. The hashtag #NotMyLuke trended, and for good reason. Even Mark Hamill came out and said he didn't consider the character the real Luke Skywalker.
I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker.
But I want to stress, it wasn't just that Luke was out of character. It wasn't just that he was written badly. It's that he was written so badly. It's hard to believe a professional, no, any writer could have possibly written something this bad. Rey is seeking out Luke to train her, and when she finds him, she presents him with his blue lightsaber, the one that belonged to his father. Luke then... 911? I'd like to report a murder. Is that supposed to be a joke? Because it's not funny. You couldn't even keep Luke in character for 6 seconds. Basically, if you don't know what's going on here, Luke, or not Luke rather, has exiled himself and turned his back on the Force because he couldn't help Kylo Ren. Sure, he could redeem one of the most evil men in the galaxy and risked his life to do so, but this whiny kid was just too much of a challenge. Luke says it would be better if the Jedi went extinct. I don't know how a character like Luke would come to a conclusion like this. He was always one to take personal responsibility. There are no Jedi teachings that created this situation. Luke just gave up. This is not a character that gives up on people. In fact, I'd say it's his main character trait, his faith in humanity, his faith in goodness. So after already metaphorically murdering this character before our very eyes, this movie hits us with the infamous reveal. Luke considered murdering a kid in his sleep because he had a vision he would turn. Do I even need to explain what's wrong with this? I've already mentioned this fact, but it bears repeating. Luke Skywalker redeemed Darth Vader! I'm pretty sure he would try, I don't know, talking to the kid. Luke isn't even a character who likes to use violence when he has to. He would never, under any circumstances, try and kill someone when they're completely defenseless, even if it's just a second. I've seen people try and defend this by referencing Luke's momentary loss of control in Return of the Jedi. Luke only snapped once his sister was directly threatened. He realized what he's doing and learns from it. That's how he's able to stand up to the Emperor. So why would the same character abandon the same sister with a kid he was so certain would turn evil? The slaughter of his students is not a good enough excuse, as the movie tries to pass off. The real Luke forgave the man responsible for the deaths of his aunt and uncle, his mentor, his friend Biggs, the torture of his sister, cutting off his hand. Luke would never abandon Han and Leia, and he would never be so certain of such a vision. Luke single-handedly proved to Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Anakin that they were wrong about destiny. I'd argue that Luke proved they were wrong about the Jedi relationship to emotions. Luke resisted the urges of his negative emotions not by blocking out his feelings, but by embracing his positive emotions, love and empathy, leading to Vader using those same emotions to save him. They portray Luke as not just a potential murderer, but as a coward. So let me just go over all the reasons why Luke would never have even put himself on this stupid island to begin with. One of the very first things we see Luke Skywalker doing is cleaning R2-D2 and 3PO and speaking to them as if they are people rather than dismissing them as just equipment like his uncle. This is the perfect introduction to one of Luke's defining character traits. When Luke realizes the Empire tracked the droids back home, he immediately rushes there, despite Ben's warnings and despite knowing he could be killed by the Empire for doing so. When R2 discovers Princess Leia is scheduled to be executed, he insists on saving her despite not knowing her and possessing no fighting skills. Luke directly disobeys Yoda and Obi-Wan and heads to Bespin to rescue his friends. Knowing full well it is nothing but a trap for him by Vader, he can't bear to stand by and do nothing. When Luke is told joining the dark side is his destiny, he looks Vader straight in the eye and throws himself off the platform with dignity. On Endor, Luke surrenders himself to the Empire so that his father can't use the Force to track him to the other rebels. While on the second Death Star, Luke bravely accepts his own death along with everyone else on board, gladly sacrificing himself to save the galaxy and his friends.
You're wrong. Soon I'll be dead, and you with me.
After redeeming his father, Luke risks his life to save Anakin, despite being told to leave him, refusing to, even after knowing his death is inevitable. So just to recap, they took a character whose defining character traits were selflessness, bravery, and empathy, and wrote him as a cowardice, murder-considering defeatist.
Look, if you're not going to take this seriously, I'm out.
When something is so on the nose, the opposite of what a character is supposed to be. You can't even think of it as bad writing anymore, it can only feel intentional. This image here is the perfect metaphor to me for the total lack of respect as to who this character is and what he meant to people. Really? That's what they think of Luke? I'm not only in disagreement, I'm insulted. Princess Leia is anything but your typical fairy tale princess. She's proactive, strong, snarky, and intelligent. Some of that may seem cliche by today's standards, but you have to remember this was 1977, when the damsel in distress archetype was still going very strong. Women in action-adventure movies were usually pushed to the sidelines or not present at all. The most popular fairy tale princesses in film at the time would have been Walt Disney's Snow White, Cinderella, and Aurora from Sleeping Beauty. Disneyland was in full swing at the time as well, pushing that fairy tale princess image hard. These three Disney heroines are not bad characters, but they are very different. Instead of Leia, it's actually Luke who shares Cinderella's dreamer trait and Snow White's pureness of heart. Instead, Leia takes on the more practical and political duties of the title. Like Luke, she has very strong morals and a sense of right and wrong, leading to her participation in the rebellion. But unlike her brother, she is more pragmatic and realistic about it. She would have happily slaughtered Vader and the Emperor given the chance. But Leia isn't too strong. If she were, she'd be boring. The scenes would lack tension. She can assist in her own rescue and even take the lead, but she does need her friends. She can't do everything herself. She values her friends and her allies in the rebellion. Leia is also not the only one who needs saving. She may be the damsel in A New Hope, but Luke fills the role during the beginning and climax of Empire, and Han fills it during the opening of Jedi. Leia's character was not totally pissed on in the new movies like Luke's was, but she was just underwhelming, a shadow of her former self. Leia in the originals was always spouting the best lines and quips.
Stuck up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder.
Here, she's just dull. Not to mention, they put her in a coma for a significant chunk of the movie instead of actually utilizing her in a meaningful way. A stray observation, but for a series that seems to revel in how progressive it is, isn't it interesting that Leia, and Luke for that matter, have had all of their more feminine mannerisms stripped away? It's almost like they're just using the superficial misconception that strong characters shouldn't be feminine, and they really don't care about good representation and just use it as a marketing tool.
I'm so happy the carbonite is gone.
As I mentioned before, Han is the more traditionally masculine of the two dudes, perfectly balancing the main trio. Lucas took inspiration for the character from James Dean and Humphrey Bogart, and he's also been compared to Clint Eastwood. We first meet this character in the cantina on Mos Eisley, where we learn he's a smuggler with a large bounty on his head. He agrees to take Ben and Luke to Alderaan in hopes of repaying the money he owes. Han sees himself as a loner, as his name alludes to, an underground criminal with a particularly aggressive species of alien at his side.
It's because a droid don't pull people's arms out of their sockets when they lose.
Always looking out for number one. He mocks Luke's sincerity and refuses to attempt to rescue Leia until Luke convinces him he'll get a reward. He wants nothing to do with the rebellion, but surprises Luke and the audience by showing up at the last minute. Han keeps his general attitude throughout the next two films, but softens up significantly, falling in love with Leia and proving himself to be a true friend to Luke and hero of the rebellion. In The Force Awakens, Han exists only as a plot device. He's there to transfer his iconic ship and sidekick over to Rey and to be killed by his son. Han is only a character in the movies to further the story of the other characters, and I don't actually have a problem with that. I don't particularly like these Torch Pass type reboots. I think the sequels could have easily existed completely divorced from the Skywalkers, but if that's what you're gonna do, then yeah, I get it. But why do the new characters need the Falcon and Chewie? It just screams of desperation. And if you're gonna actually use Luke, Leia, and Chewie as characters in the sequels, why can't we see Han's death impact them in any meaningful way? Because if not, why not simply have Kylo Ren kill Leia, Luke, and Chewbacca at the same time? It would have made the same difference and spared us Rian Johnson's BuzzFeed tier Luke Skywalker hot take. But don't think it's just the original trilogy characters they can't write for. No. JJ, Ryan, and Kathleen somehow managed to screw up their own characters too. So, The Force Awakens, when it came out, people actually liked it. The Last Jedi was pretty roundly hated, though it did have its defenders. Rise of Skywalker was hated by literally everyone. People who hated Episode 7, people who liked Episode 7, people who liked episode 8, people who hated episode 8. After actually managing to get some people to eat their Star Wars gruel and like it, they just couldn't keep it going for one more movie. They served up their Star Wars brand imitation gruel and it was rejected en masse. And the reason for that was that they basically did to the new characters what they did to the original ones. It's so incompetent you have to just stand back in awe as to how it even happened. And we will be getting into the how, but right now let's talk about the characters. Our new trio is Rey, Finn, and Poe, and I don't think it'll come off as a huge shock when I say that I was not one of those people that ever got into these three characters. The only one that had potential in my eyes was Finn. A disaffected stormtrooper is a genuinely good idea, but they just had nothing to say about that concept and nowhere to take the character. After the first one, he pretty much has nothing to do. They set up a relationship between him and Rey, but for some reason they decide to give him a different love interest halfway through. And we'll get to Rose, but basically this entire subplot is just an admission that they had no idea what his role in the story should actually be. And you can't blame it all on Rian Johnson. Kathleen Kennedy was supposed to be the one in charge of making sure these movies fit together. And boy, she must either be the worst person at her job in the world, or she just didn't show up to work because, yikes. Why decide not to have Rey and Finn get together? I don't know, what are they, racist? Instead, they give him a replacement love interest.
You know, exactly like what I just praised the original trilogy for not doing to Luke.
But, and this is the best part, they wrote the new girl out. She does make a small appearance in Skywalker Rises, but the entire arc is totally abandoned. Then you've got Poe, and I was actually able to get an interview with Poe. So here he is. Here's Poe. Hi, Poe. He's boring, is what I'm saying. Now, I don't think Rey is a very interesting character either, but Daisy Ridley does have a presence on the screen. Poe may be the dullest character I have ever seen in a movie, and I've seen Alexander: The Other Side of Dawn. And that movie has a 3-minute scene of Alex eating pasta in total silence. But I would watch the pasta scene 1,000 times before I subjected myself to even another second of Poe Dameron. Why is he here? Like, if you can't figure out a way to make your trilogy have 3 main characters, you could just have the 2. It's okay, you know. Disney probably demanded 3 though, let's be real. But he simply doesn't have a consistent character. His personality changes from movie to movie, and even scene to scene. He simply is whatever the plot needs him to be. But what's even more important than the individual characters is how they work together. The chemistry. George Lucas knew this, and that's why he grouped off his considered actors for each character into groups of 3, whoever they hit it off with best, and casted the 3 leads as a group, choosing Mark, Carey, and Harrison because they had the best chemistry together. The new trio does not capture that same magic. Just look at the scene where Rey and Finn meet for the first time. It's trying so hard to be charming, but it's shot and scripted like a Happy Madison movie. Rey gets to show off her personality in the scene, but Finn doesn't. He's just the butt of the joke. Remember Luke and Han's early scenes? That was comedic too, but in a way where we got to see both characters' personalities bounce off each other. Finn, Rey, and Poe don't work as a trio because their personalities don't balance each other. Here's just one example. In the originals, Han was the muscle, Leia the brains, and Luke the heart. They had other traits, of course, but putting these concepts at the core of each one of them, they perfectly balance each other out. This makes it really easy for them to interact and to react to situations differently. In the Disneyverse, Finn is the heart, in the first one at least, Rey the muscle and the brain, and Poe is basically worthless. Like I mentioned, this character is too flexible, so he can't have that kind of natural charisma a Han Solo or a Luke Skywalker can. What is there for Finn and Poe to even contribute? Rey does everything. Finn is supposed to be the heart, but Rey is the one who redeems the villain. And there you have the crux of the problem. The writers give every big moment to Rey and leave nothing for the other 2. The other characters in this movie are a joke. Most of them are just poor substitutes for already established Star Wars characters. We have our imitation gruel Darth Vader in the form of Kylo Ren. This character, when he speaks under the mask, he sounds like a child wearing a Halloween costume.
The girl I've heard so much about.
I literally laughed out loud the first time I heard that. He doesn't come across as intimidating or torture, and he fails to project anything other than whiny entitlement. They steal the redemption ending from Return of the Jedi. Who even is Rey to Rylo Ren? Luke is Anakin's long-lost son. Rey and Kylo had to team up a couple times, and also they hate each other. Furthermore, this ending is just laughable. It's painfully obvious it wasn't planned. It was just thrown together at the last minute. I mean, what's the theme here? Hatred is man's downfall. Love conquers all. Sexual tension conquers all. Why not try something different? If we see a fall and then a redemption, why not have a role reversal? Have Kylo turn good and Rey fall to the dark side. That would have been unexpected. Wouldn't have made the 3 movies fit, but it would have fit better. Even his real name, Ben Solo, I mean, why would Han and Leia name him after Obi-Wan's pseudonym? Luke is the one who had a relationship with Ben Kenobi. I know Leia knew who he was, but did she ever even meet him? The other villain, appropriately, his name rhymes with joke. First of all, the design is just horrible. He looks like a video game character. They kill him off too early, forcing them to make the horrendous decision to reveal Emperor Palpatine has been alive this entire time. So firstly, how did he even survive? But more importantly, why would you do this? Besides just admitting that your villain sucked so bad, you had to bring back an old one. By doing this, you have destroyed Anakin's entire character arc. If Palpatine survived, Anakin's death meant nothing. What did the Skywalkers do to Disney to make them hate them so much? It's beyond insulting to imply the Emperor survived, to have him be killed by characters with no relationship whatsoever to him. Plus, their explanation for how he survives is that he has Venture Brothers-style clone immunity, so why is it even a big deal they killed him this time? Now, the other big problem with this movie is that it does what I like to call mining for woke points. Now, this is when a big media company pretends to care about representation while putting no effort into the characters to actually make good representation. Well, if they don't really care, then why do they do it? They do it for the news coverage, so that they can get these little positive stories, like first ever Asian in Star Wars, first Latino in Star Wars, first lesbian kiss in Star Wars, and then that's it. Once they get the headline, their job is done. It doesn't matter what they do next. They will have this character played by a Latino actor who's this heroic pilot, and then decide to reveal he used to be a drug smuggler. Like, they don't give a shit what they're actually saying or implying with these characters, it's just carelessness. Out of everyone though, Rose Tico got it the worst. So she's introduced in the second movie and accompanies Finn on this useless subplot to the casino planet. They hint at this romance between her and Finn, and then in the third movie, she's pretty much just gone. She has a few lines, but she's totally removed from the plot. She had no arc. She has no point to even being in the story. Listen to this quote from Rian Johnson. "It was just these 2 dudes on an adventure. I knew something was wrong when I looked at their dialogue and realized I could interchange any of the lines. There wasn't conflict between them, so I realized I had to come up with something else. Finn needing somebody else to go with who would actually challenge him and push him and contrast with him was where Rose came from." Okay, here's an idea. You could write Poe as an actual character. Basically, instead of doing that, they just added this girl as a replacement for this one little excursion. That's the only reason she exists, and that whole little adventure could have been cut out of the movie anyways, because it's only there to give Finn something to do. If you are actually someone who cares about representation, don't accept this kind of shit. Don't let these giant media conglomerates just throw you a Rose Tico bone so that you can be the one to fight with it and get all the meat off of it. Then of course they did the little lesbian kiss in the latest one. A 2-second blink and you'll miss it scene between 2 background characters so that they can easily cut it out as to not offend the government of a foreign country. Aren't you so glad they get to control our art? If you had asked George Lucas to cut out something because it might offend some demographic, he would have said, "Fuck you, bitch, I'ma add 25 CGI dancing aliens." That how Hollywood works. Level 1 artist, level 100 executive, bro. So Laura Dern is here, for some reason, just totally wasted. Plays probably the worst Star Wars character in history. I don't know why they bothered wasting this actress. I know a lot of people said she was bad. It was totally phoned in. Most people that I saw recognized her from Jurassic Park, but Laura Dern is actually really good. She's given amazing performances in films like The Seas at Ruby Ridge, Citizen Ruth, Wild at Heart, and Blue Velvet. She's totally wasted here. I mean, everyone is, but I don't even know what she's doing here. It'd be like putting Meryl Streep in one of these things. I mean, she's not as famous, obviously, but that's the type of actress she is. It doesn't make any sense. Rey is not a good protagonist in these 3 movies, and I'm going to tell you why. She doesn't have anything to her character. Her motivations are weak. Her whole thing is who are her parents, and the payoff is, I mean, it's so bad. They never take any chances with this character. They don't give her strong personality traits. She doesn't have an arc. I'm going to prove it to you. So in stories, there's this thing called an initial incident. This is what makes the hero set out on their journey. In most movies, there'll be 2, an internal one and an external one. For example, the Disney movie Mulan. External incident is the draft. Mulan doesn't want her father to go because he's too old, so she takes his place. Internally, Mulan wants to prove she isn't a failure. Now go to Star Wars. External, Luke receives Leia's distress call and his aunt and uncle are murdered. Internal, Luke wants adventure and to learn more about the Force because of its connection with his dead father. Force Awakens. External, First Order attacks her village. Internal, well, you tell me, she seemed perfectly content being a scavenger. Second problem, Rey starts out too strong. Just look at the scene where she meets Finn. She's fighting off all these dudes with her stick and you think Finn's coming over to help, but no, she just kicks all of their asses. She's shown to be excellent in hand-to-hand combat consistently and since the very beginning. Now let's look at Luke. In A New Hope, Luke is pretty weak. He gets attacked and knocked out by a sand person and then threatened and manhandled in the cantina, being saved by Ben both times. On the Death Star, Luke comes out of it okay, but it's clear he's in way over his head. In Empire, Luke is attacked by the Wampa and is saved by Han Solo. Later, he gets his ass handed to him by Vader and ultimately gets his hand cut off. Rey is good with the lightsaber the first time she ever tries. Luke doesn't even use one to fight anyone in A New Hope. He gets better in Empire but still loses and isn't shown to be truly skilled using one until Return of the Jedi. At the same point in the 2 trilogies where Luke had become better, Rey was already perfect. Rey also hits every target she aims for with a blaster. Luke does start out with a few skills, ones that he clearly learned while growing up on Tatooine. The main skill he starts with is piloting. Well, surprise, surprise, Rey's a great pilot too. And not only that, she can fix the Millennium Falcon 3 different times and figure out what's wrong with it even before Han Solo. You could make the argument that her experience as a scrapper would make her a good mechanic, and that would be fine, but it's when it's coupled with everything else. She can start off with a few skills, but when she starts off with all of them, she has nothing to learn, no growth, and no journey. And if you still don't believe me that Rey is overpowered, let's just take a look at her Force abilities. Luke takes 3 movies to harness his abilities. We see him struggling to get his lightsaber in the cave. He has to seriously strain himself to contact Leia. Even after becoming a Jedi and easily defeating Jabba's goons, he is totally weak to the Emperor. Rey, meanwhile, uses a Jedi mind trick with no training. Having only even learned about the Force a few days ago, she never struggles to use the Force. She can basically do anything. She never loses. She doesn't get seriously injured. She certainly never loses a hand. Luke's fight against Vader in Empire and his torture by the Emperor in Jedi are great scenes. There's tension there because Luke could easily be killed in either of those scenes. Rey is simply too powerful for there to be any real tension. These sequel movies totally fail to capture the tone of Star Wars, and as for themes, there really aren't any. Unless you want to go really broad and maybe say something like good versus evil, but even that doesn't work because J.J. Abrams went with a classic good versus evil idea, but Ryan's stupid middle movie wants to do gray morality. So the trilogy, it's laughable to even call it that, can't have a theme because each movie is so radically different. Such a big part of Star Wars was always the way it drew from and made allusions to mythology and stories. Star Wars is a fairy tale in space. That's why they all start off with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's supposed to be like once upon a time in a land far, far away. Star Wars just immediately immerses you in that world. The concepts of the world don't need to be explained, they simply are. You don't have to know what an R2 unit does, what Tosche Station is, how a parsec is measured. What is a nerf herder? It doesn't matter. The dialogue just so perfectly conveys that this story is taking place in this fantasy land, this galaxy with no relation to our planet or time at all. So in the sequels, when you have characters using lines like big ass door, it feels really out of place. There's no attempt to write that space fantasy dialogue. One of the first things George Lucas did when he was developing the idea that would become Star Wars was to write down different words and names he thought would sound good in the world he was trying to create. The dialogue in the sequels just feels like any other mainstream blockbuster. The sequels lack the fairy tale quality because they don't draw from anything but previous Star Wars movies. I doubt these three numbskulls even attempted to capture that tone. And the jokes, my god, the jokes in the sequels are bad. The old movies had jokes too, but they were subtle, they were totally character built. Just compare some of the classic funny Star Wars lines.
Will somebody get this big walking carpet out of my way?
You're lucky you don't taste very good.
I used to live here, you know.
You're gonna die here, you know. Convenient.
And now we have...
They fly now?
It's all like that. Dumb, obvious jokes that anyone could have said. And in fact, they all did. They all get a turn to say that terrible line. Like, Luke couldn't have said the walking carpet line. Han couldn't have said lucky don't taste very good. That's a total Luke line. A little lightheartedness while still being totally sincere and caring. Meanwhile, Rian Johnson said so himself. Finn and Poe are the same character. They have no chemistry. He had to create Rose just to have someone who would have a different reaction than Finn's. In Bob Iger's book, he has a chapter about Star Wars. He's the CEO of Disney. And he says, and I quote, "He knows what Star Wars is all about. It's about Lego Millennium Falcons and toy lightsabers." Well, there you have it, folks. Straight from the donkey's ass. The acquisition of Star Wars by Disney was all about the merchandising, baby. And hey, Lucas knew the value of that from the beginning. But kids wanted those action figures and those ships and weapons because they saw them in a good movie that connected with them and fueled their imagination. Disney, on the other hand, just makes characters so that they can be toys. Why do you think the trilogy is so full of secondary characters with no real bearing on the plot? You've got the main three, Kylo Ren, the old cast, Bounty Hunter chick, Lando's daughter, BB-8 the new droid, even though the old droids are in these movies too, and another new droid, Hux, Phasma, Rose, Rose's sister, those stupid porgs, and like a billion others. They only exist to be toys, but the best part is, those toys don't sell. The toys that sell well are still the original trilogy characters, the toys that have always sold well. Now, you can't obviously find exact statistics, exact character breakdowns of sales, but if you just go into a store, you can see which toys are getting those blowout prices.
And there's our good friend Constable Zuvio. He's been down since day one, or I should say been up since day one, because no one has bought this toy since September of 2015. That's Rey's extendable staff. They have cases of them, and no one is buying them. And General Hux scanned in at $1. Then we have Rose, the true hero of the rebellion, and she scanned for $1. Her useless sister Paige, well, she's $1 too, so nothing new there. As Rey is in high demand, she scans for a whopping $1.10. So we have these titanium helmets, and they didn't scan on the scanner, but they were already clearanced at a whopping 25 cents. Because they're $24.99 originally. What do they scan for? Let's find out together. $2.50. These are the electronic lightsabers, they're not the little crappy ones.
But it's not just that. The merch itself is really bad. I remember when I was a kid, the Disney store used to be synonymous with high quality, you know, beautiful dolls, the best stuffed animals, detailed costumes. Well, not anymore. Disney is the bottom of the barrel when it comes to licensed crap. Over at Walmart, we have these beautiful R2-D2 leg things. For a small fortune of $38, you can get some Star Wars lip balm. If your kid wants to sleep on the most forgettable droid, he can for a mere $140. And here's Karen demanding to see the manager. And now the main man themselves, the Disney Store. And like Bob Iger said, toy lightsabers are really important. And you'll see here, you can get a Kylo Ren lightsaber, a Rey lightsaber, Mace Windu, Darth Vader, Yoda, Darth Maul, and no Luke. Seems kinda weird, right? Oh, but you can't get this Luke dog leash. Why does that seem oddly appropriate? Now, the Disney Store actually has a section for each character, so I checked them out of curiosity, and unsurprisingly, Luke's is the smallest by at least half compared to the other major characters. That includes Leia, Han, and Darth Vader, and most of the stuff isn't exclusively Luke either. Leia's section's all Leia. The Han stuff is all Han. When I searched Star Wars on Hot Topic, I saw Porkins before I saw Luke. You can get Padme and you can get Vader. The only time you're gonna see Luke pop up on these shirts is in group shots. What did Luke do to piss Disney off so bad? Now, I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying. It kinda seems like Disney is intentionally excluding Luke from their merchandising line. Why? Is there something about Luke's character that Disney wants to distance themselves from as a brand, kind of like they did with the slave Leia costume? Maybe Disney is just trying to artificially erase Luke Skywalker from popular culture and replace him with Rey as the new face of the franchise, but that plan won't ever work. Luke Skywalker, as I've mentioned, resonated with people. He was a phenomenon all on his own, and Rey just can't do that. She can't achieve that. She isn't interesting enough or relatable enough to have any real impact. If she were from a movie that didn't have a famous title slapped on, I doubt she'd even be half as popular as she is now. She isn't Luke Skywalker or Harry Potter or Sailor Moon or Wonder Woman. She doesn't capture the public's imagination like those characters did, and Disney can't force her onto that level as much as they desperately want to. Those characters don't just have better personalities or more memorable designs. They are allowed to be vulnerable. Rey is not. That is why nobody can relate to her or wishes to see her succeed.
And basically said fuck you to anyone that loves Star Wars, anyone that cares about Luke Skywalker, anyone that cares about anything about Star Wars.
$4 billion to just make it up as you go along?
Well,
Are you fucking shitting me?
Think about this.
It's so boring.
Yeah.
Like, it's so much more interesting to have evil persona, or like evil encapsulated in this one like ball, like the Death Star. Like, what's more interesting, fighting one fucking thing or 1,000 little things?
I'd like another Return of the Jedi, a remake, a lesser remake, even at that.
And it's like, oh, your parents, one of them was Palpatine's son or daughter. You fill in the gaps there. We're not going to do that because we don't have time.
It's just
Dude,
like, no.
I wish Rey would have just dropped her pants and just shit all over the fucking.
Should have just
because that's what the fucking movie
diuretic
fucking did.
Number 13 is Finn's arc, but when I wrote arc, I put it in quotes to indicate my disdain.
And I really wish we just hadn't made the sequel trilogy.
They can fly now. They can fly now. They can fly now.
Daisy Ridley is stuck playing one of the biggest Mary Sues of all time.
Of course, they're taking that important moment that was so powerful that I've never met a single person that didn't say they weren't affected by this moment in Star Wars, and they're giving it to Rey. Oh, how big fucking surprising. They make Luke a shitty character. They made all the characters that we all loved into shitty human beings, and then they're just gonna give it all to Rey. Because Rey's perfect. Rey can do no wrong. Are you fucking kidding me?
I doubt I have ever seen a major Hollywood production that has been this bad. And not just because of all the other stuff I talked about, but just on a fundamental filmmaking level. These movies, especially Rise of Skywalker, are simply broken on a fundamental level. And when you actually think of them as a trilogy, it's even worse. Have you ever seen a trilogy of movies that just flat out don't fit together? Basically, J.J. Abrams was told to make a Star Wars trilogy, and in his creative genius, he decided to just remake A New Hope. Then he was going to remake Empire and remake Jedi. Certainly not an original plan, but hey, at least it was a plan. Then, for reasons I still can't understand, Disney and Kathleen Kennedy, the head of Lucasfilms, the head of the Star Wars brand, decided to bring in Rian Johnson to do the second film and let him do whatever he wanted. This left JJ to do the last film and try and get himself out of the corners he'd been backed into story-wise, which he utterly failed to do, by the way. It's just unbelievable. I mean, could you imagine if the director of Prisoner of Azkaban had decided to kill off Voldemort? No! Warner Brothers never would have allowed that! But Disney did! Disney let this guy kill off the trilogy's main villain during the second movie with no plan going forward. It's unreal. These movies are a mess. They are overstuffed with expository dialogue and useless characters. And yes, Ryan really messed things up by changing so much stuff in his movie, but JJ cannot be let off the hook for this either. Why did people even think this guy was a good director in the first place? Like, he's always sucked. Can we just accept that now? He made those terrible Star Trek movies. He did Super 8, another movie that just utterly failed to focus on its main character. Like, okay dude, you tried to do Star Trek and you totally missed the theme of that show. You tried to do The Goonies/E.T. and you forgot to focus on the kids. You tried to do Star Wars and you took a dump all over the Skywalkers. 3 strikes, you're out, go away, you hack. Show, don't tell. You hear that phrase a lot. Because what is the point of visual storytelling if all the information is just spewed at us through dialogue? These movies look pretty and they have some unique locations, but the scenery does nothing but distract. During battles, the scenery will often be emphasized instead of the dynamic of the fight and who is involved with it. They don't use the environment, and the fight choreography is laughably bad. The original trilogy is a marvel in filmmaking. It has some truly gorgeous shots, and they aren't just beautiful because of how they look, but because of their context. The characters don't grow and change throughout these movies. I've already mentioned that Rey has no arc. None of them do. And retconning Luke after he's dead to make him a little more like his canon self does not count. For example, Han Solo, smuggler, reluctant rebel, hero of the rebellion. Luke, farm boy, rebel hero, Jedi Knight. Padme, queen, war hero, dead. Finn, stormtrooper turned rebel, rebel. Poe, rebel pilot, rebel pilot. At the end of the first movie, they're the same character as they are by the end of the third movie. They're not characters, they're character outlines. These movies and the people behind them seem to have such a hatred for the old characters. Despite JJ claiming to be a fan, these movies constantly undercut the original characters. Just think about when you saw Return of the Jedi for the first time. Didn't you think, man, I sure hope Han and Leia don't stay together. I sure hope Han goes on to have a whiny, emo son and murders him. I really hope Luke Skywalker loses faith in humanity and abandons his sister and best friend. Why are these characters even here? Like, Rian Johnson basically said he wanted Luke to be Obi-Wan. Well, Luke isn't Obi-Wan. He doesn't represent the ways of the old Jedi. He reformed the Jedi. Why is R2-D2 still here when this orange snowman abomination is clearly a rip-off replacement of him? Why, in the name of ass, would you decide to bring back Palpatine as a villain? J.J. Abrams, you are a liar. You are not a fan of Star Wars. If you are the most tone-deaf fan in the world. Like, does he even realize that bringing back this character totally undermines everything Anakin and Luke Skywalker accomplished in the previous movies? There is a reason Anakin kills the Emperor. The story cannot work if it were Luke or Leia or Chewie who killed him. It can only be Anakin. He is killing his master, the man who turned him into Darth Vader, killing that part of himself and saving his son. Anakin was a puppet and a servant to this man, just like the Emperor told Luke he would become. He disobeyed him and killed him because the love he had for his little boy was so much more powerful than the dark side. Yoda told Luke, once you give in to the dark side, it will forever rule you, but he was wrong. The prequels built upon this point. Anakin was born a slave. When he killed Palpatine, he finally fulfilled his destiny, destroying the Sith and bringing balance to the Force. Oh, actually no, he didn't. Palpatine was killed by some snot-nosed brats who had no relationship to him whatsoever. Also, Rey brought balance to the Force, not Anakin, lol. We have to explicitly say that now because apparently audiences are too stupid to give movies even a second worth of thought. And then, Rey Palpatine steals the name Skywalker for herself like the greedy little troll that she is. The name of a man she doesn't even like. She goes and buries the lightsaber right in the middle of Anakin's mom, Uncle Owen, and Aunt Beru's graves. Just to show that she truly is Palpatine's granddaughter, she buries Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber in the goddamn sand.
I don't like sand.
Disney's Star Wars is simply the perfect metaphor for the death of cinema. It bears the name of Walt Disney, one of the most influential and innovative filmmakers to ever live. A perfectionist who stopped at no lengths to achieve his vision. It bears the name Star Wars, the creation of a filmmaker who nobody believed in, whose faith in his idea paid off, who had an unwavering passion for his world and his characters. Even if that passion did sometimes result in things like the special editions, he did it because he was an artist who never allowed his paintings to be complete. And these, cash cow nostalgia bait with so little fodder energy put in that they don't even tell a cohesive story, a complete lack of understanding of the source material, an overseer who for some reason refused to do her job. Nothing but paper-thin, meaningless, soulless, corporate dreck. And now, I will end this video with a quote. I get asked all the time, what happens after Return of the Jedi? And there really is no answer for that. The movies were the story of Anakin Skywalker and Luke Skywalker, and when Luke saves the galaxy and redeems his father, that's where the story ends.